We're talking all things antiquated next on Retro Serial. Hey everyone, I'm Ian C. You're watching or listening to Retro Serial. On this episode, Thrash Pondo and I talk about all things kind of antiquated. You know, all those cool things that we used to do growing up Gen X. All the cool things we used to have growing up Gen X. And we don't have them anymore for one reason or another. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I don't want to introduce this because I introduced it in the video. You're going to love it. If you grew up Generation X, you're going to think, oh yeah, I used to do that, and I used to go here, and I used to go there. You're going to love this video. You're going to love this podcast, and it's going to bring back a lot of good memories for you. And even if you didn't grow up Gen X, I still think you're going to like this podcast and understanding what us maybe older now generation used to do in our free time and used to have and used to buy, and we don't buy it anymore. All right, well, with all that said, before we get to the video today or the audio today, the podcast today, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share it on your favorite social media. Those things mean the world to us here at Retro Serial. They're free for you to do. If you're listening, leave a review and share it, and leave a rating, a review, and share, please, by all means. And then you can also give if you're so inclined. We have Venmo. We have a couple tiers over at Patreon. Other than that, it's just that's it. Just the big deal is liking, sharing, subscribing. All right, I've talked too much about it already. Let's get straight to our interview. How's it going, everybody? Well, you've already heard the introduction to this program, so I won't belay the point. However, it does seem like, because I film it at different times. So I film the introduction and then I film this. And so I just want to make sure that we know what we're talking about here. We're going to be talking about that which is antiquated, growing up Gen X. So all things antiquated. We're going to be talking about like technology, but we're also going to be talking about like stuff we did, just anything that kind of comes to our mind as far as antiquated decisions are concerned. And of course, I have with me, as always, my good friend, Thrash Pondo Ponds. How are you doing, buddy?
I am happy to be here as always, Ian C. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm doing good. You came up with this idea. We were going to do it last week, and you had mentioned it, and I thought, man, this is a great idea because there is so much that goes out of existence almost, that we just don't even use anymore. And I wanted to expand it a little bit. You thought of technology, but I also thought of like just other things that we do, the stuff we do as well as with the stuff we use. But what's interesting, one of the things that came to my mind when you said this is carbon paper. Do you remember carbon paper?
I do remember carbon paper. When you wanted to make copies of something, you
Yeah.
like on a typewriter, you'd put like a piece of carbon paper between two regular sheets of paper, and it would make a copy of the thing you were typing because there
Yeah.
was ink embedded in this sheet. So
Right.
anytime you pressed the key, it would continue the print onto the other side.
They used
I
it for
remember that.
receipts too. They'd like do a receipt and then they would have like you'd write on it and you'd have a carbon paper. That was, I think that was even going out of usage when I was a kid. I mean, when I was getting older as an adult, that one kind of fell off quite a while ago, but I do remember it still. And I don't even know if kids today would even know what carbon paper is, you know?
Its final stand was, and I might be getting ahead of myself, but you remember in the days before everyone got a credit card,
Yes.
when most people didn't have credit cards, usually like grandparents or people with a lot of money, they had credit cards. And because not a lot of people use credit cards, they didn't invest in these electronic readers that would give you an instant charge. What they did was they had a little machine, and you still see it like old TV shows and movies and stuff. It was like a little, it looked like a template,
Yeah.
and you'd put the card and this weird. It was like three pieces of paper with a carbon in between, and you would run this over the card, and it made three copies: one for them, one for you, and one as a backup.
Well,
And the
yeah, I
joke
think.
was, and they actually use this in an episode with Married with Children, where Al says, "Don't do anything funny with the carbons," because that was a big loss prevention issue. Because they used to just throw the carbons away, so clowns could go through the trash of these like high-end department stores and get these pieces of carbon paper and it would have your credit card number on it.
Oh, wow, wow.
So it was
Well,
kind of a big deal.
that's back when the well, I mean, I was around even. Well, I mean, it wasn't even that long ago that you had raised numbers on your credit card. It wasn't until actually even fairly recently that I got a card, maybe like even like 3 or 4 years ago, that you got a card that didn't have raised numbers on it. I don't know, at least where I in my part of the world, I still had raised numbers until like 3 or 4, because that's what we used to do. They had the raised numbers so it could go through the credit card. Now it's just,
You get an imprint.
yeah, now the numbers aren't raised at all. Was that late for you, or did
The
you?
last the last time I saw something like that, I was working in I was working in this, I want to say it was a Cumberland Farms, and they had upgraded their system because more and more people weren't carrying cash.
Yeah.
No, it was the video store.
Okay.
By the time I managed the video store, you had as many credit card sales as you had cash sales by this point. Checks were going away.
Yeah.
And the problem was, as you remember, and it still happens to this day, but it was way more prevalent 20 plus years ago, the interweb would crash. This whole internet thing, the internet is great until it's not working. And
Yeah.
we become so straitjacketed into it. And back 20 years ago, if you had people wanting to pay with their credit cards and the system was down, you're going to hemorrhage money. So we used to pull out these readers and put them on the counter so we could, and we had the emergency backup system. But the last time I saw a place even use something like that, I think I was in a mom pop liquor store like 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember thinking, "Oh, how quaint." They don't get an electric charge straight away because what you'd have to do is you keep. That's why you had two. You would get your receipt. The establishment would keep two copies. They would have to mail one in
Yeah.
to Chase Manhattan or Wichita Bank and Trust, whatever the bank behind your credit card is, to receive payment. And then they kept one hard copy for their records in case the charge was contested.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
I remember thinking, oh, that's adorable. They still
Yeah.
have these old readers. Yeah.
What? But when was the last time you had a credit card that had, or a debit card, or a bank card of some kind that had raised numbers on it?
I'd say it's got to be minimum of 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Five or
I,
6 years. The
I'd say, yeah, but
last time I remember using one that had raised numbers on it was, well, it wasn't that long ago that they did away with it. Like I said, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where I am in the world. But I do remember using one in 2009 when I went up to a Russian martial arts um, uh, seminar in Canada, and in order to buy anything, they ran the card because it was out in the middle of nowhere. So they had like an old card reader. But that was 2009. Was the last time I'd seen an old used card reader. But my raised numbers, though, what I'm saying is my raised numbers didn't go away until like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, or something like that. Might have been five. Time gets away from us as we
it sure does, especially over the last 4 or 5 years.
as
The
we age.
2020s are just sort of a blur for most people.
Right, right. Well, that's that. And I started out strong on that one because that was the one that kind of came to my mind was the carbon paper, because that started to go away even as I was growing up. Like it was just kind of less and less. And but what about you? Name a technology we can riff on, or something that we used to do, something that's antiquated. This shows all things antiquated.
With me, it has to be home entertainment.
Okay.
Because the home entertainment industry sort of went from its infancy to its peak to almost, I don't want to say puttering out, but almost became a footnote in my lifetime. And let me explain. When I was very young, I still remembered the campfire television, where if your house had a TV, it had one big, beautiful television set in the family room, oftentimes in a wood grain
Hmm.
cabinet, or at least like some type of giant box.
The big old
And
zenith.
exactly. And the family would get together and watch TV as a family, like the camp, they call it the campfire. Everyone would get together to watch it. Or the kids would watch on Saturday mornings when the parents were asleep, or the parents would watch TV when the kids were in bed. But anyway, there was a TV. When they started doing multiple TVs in homes as they got smaller and cheaper,
Mhm.
I'm sure we all remember my story about when my grandparents got me my first black and white portable TV for my bedroom when I was like 11 or 12, and it was sort of the world to me. And that would have been in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And that to me was the dawn of a new era in home entertainment, because what came out right around that time? Home theater. In
Yeah.
the old days, when you wanted to watch a movie, you went to the movie theaters to see it. Then some of the networks started showing TVs with commercials and whatnot, and you had a few paid channels like HBO. But the problem with them is you saw what they wanted to show you and paid for the privilege. Someone came up with a brilliant idea. We will build a box that plays tapes, and we will tape movies on them. And you could buy or rent these tapes and bring them to the house and watch whatever movie you want. And that was a game changer.
Right. Right.
It was hideously expensive, but the idea that I could just walk into a store and say, you know what I feel like watching tonight? Raiders of the Lost Ark. Good sir, please rent me a copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And he would put it in my hands and I would go home and play it. Now, these first places, that was the weird thing. Only rich people owned VCRs when they first started coming out. They were like
Yep.
1,000, 1,100 bucks. Even in my early recommend memory, they were still about 600. So what they would do is they would form these clubs, these little shops, and you would get a club membership. And if you were a club member, they would rent you a DVD, a VCR player. If you weren't a member, you had to pay like a 50, 75, $100 deposit. But members just had to pay the fee and nothing else. And then you would rent the movies you wanted. And it went on that way for a couple of years until the technology became so much cheaper, people could then afford it. And what's really weird is, I mean, if you think about how much this changed home entertainment, the fact that the whole shebang only lasted about 20 years before it started to peter out is just amazing. I mean, the idea of waiting to Friday and you'd go grocery shopping on the way home from grocery shopping, you'd stop into the video store and rent your player and rent a few movies, and that it became part of your routine. And
Yeah.
it's weird because as it exploded, I mean, yeah, there was Blockbuster, later Hollywood Video, but supermarkets started renting videos,
I remember that.
pharmacies started renting videos. There was a little strip mall in my neighborhood, and a pool supply place decided to branch out and it put in a video wall. So I used to go to the Little Peach, which is a glorified bodega. I would go
Yeah.
there to get like snacks and junk food for my buddies and I, and then I'd go across the concourse and rent a couple of movies. They were everywhere, and then they were nowhere. It's so odd. I mean, now it's great because nowadays you can stream on everything, and
Right.
even the TV is starting to go away. People watch things on their
On their
phones
on
or
their phone or
laptop.
their computers. Yeah, the laptop.
Exactly.
Um,
Um,
this kind of goes hand in hand. Well, let me just say a couple things about this. The I was one of the later people to get a VCR player, and I've mentioned this before. We were late to get the microwave. We were late to get a VCR player. We were just kind of later. The very first VCR player that I owned, it was by the time that it came with a TV. Do you remember that?
I
Those ones
do
that
the
oh
combo units.
you have one. You have a couple of them up there. So
Mhm.
that's how late it was when I actually got a VC. I think it was like maybe 1990 or 91 by the time I actually owned a VCR player. Now I lived with people who before that, I had lived with people who had a VCR player, so I wasn't like jonesing and I wasn't renting all the time. But I do remember when they first came out. But I remember too that when they first came out, like they rented Betamax, and they were certain stores that did Betamax. They did the Laserdisc, and they did the VCR, or the VH. Is it VHS?
VHS.
Is that, yeah,
Yeah,
VHS.
VHS was the tape. VCR was the player.
Oh, okay. All right. So, and yeah, like you're saying too, grocery stores. I remember that in grocery stores, you could go to a grocery store, pick up your eggs, your milk, and whatever and then also go to the video section as well. And we went to the video section, and you'd rent videos there, and then there was these little ma and pop places, and as soon as as soon as Blockbuster kind of did it, and then Hollywood Video did it, I remember the first time I'd go into places and they were gone. I mean, it was gone. And this also gets us to kind of a thing we did, not just technology we had, but a thing we did. I mean, whose night wasn't part of their night, part of their Friday night or their weekend or whatever, to actually go to a video store and find, that adventure of trying to find something, or the venture of the new release, when something was going to come out. Earlier, it was just like whatever they had, you know what I mean? But then pretty soon it was just like, oh, Twister's coming out on Friday, you know what I mean? Or whatever. What was it? Tuesdays? Yeah,
Always
Tuesday.
a Tuesday. Tuesday
Always
was new release day.
Yeah, the new release date. And you're like, okay, Twister, you got to call. Adam's Family Values is coming out, and that kind of thing. And you try to get there to get your tape. And a lot of times, by the time Friday rolled around, you couldn't. The new releases were out. Unless you got there early or whatever. And I remember hanging around the video store. Did you have the video store one where you could call and put your name on a list and they would call you? Or no? Did you do that? I know Hollywood
Don't
Video
recall
used to do
doing that. Well, I was a movie buff. There was always something I wanted to see. So I would just make my selection based on what was there. Every now and then I'd be like, um, you know, I'd like to reserve a movie. I had a couple places that would do that, like I want to reserve this movie, and they go, "We'll put your name down on the list. If it shows up, we'll put it aside for you."
that.
But
Yeah.
I don't recall the video stores calling me. That's a good
Oh,
idea, though.
no, I believe that Hollywood Video used to call because you could put your name on a list and they would call you and you come get it. And
A couple video stores down here on Cape Cod, because it was such a big summer tourist crowd and so many people. This is back before DoorDash. Um, a lot of restaurants would have their own delivery service, and a couple of the local restaurants paired with video stores. So let's say you'd want to call Peking Express to get some Chinese food. After you made your order, they'd be like, "Would you like a movie tonight?" Really? I could do that? Oh, yes. We can stop and rent you a movie. Video store. They would actually stop on the way to the delivery, stop at the video store, and grab a movie for you, so you could watch a movie while you had your takeout dinner. I thought
oh
that was
wow,
brilliant.
that is pretty brilliant. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I do now. This was probably getting into the 2000s at least, maybe late 90s, where like Domino's would like have free movies. You remember that? Where they'd bring and it
No, I don't remember
Yeah,
that.
they do.
Oh wow.
They had but it was just like the bare minimum packaging of it. It wasn't like a big or it wasn't, and they were DVDs by then too. But they weren't like the package of DVDs. It was just like the paper, and it had the name of the movie on it and stuff like that. That was fun though. That was a lot of fun to actually go to, even if I didn't get anything. Going to video stores and looking around was a lot of fun for me. And do you ever wish that the Laserdisc would have done better?
Well, here's the thing with the Laserdisc. You're gonna find this hard to believe. A lot of my friends were in high school were geeks, and many of them were tech junkies, and they swore by the Laserdisc. It's so much better, so much crisper, so much yada, so much blutta. And there were things you could do with it. The first time they offered commentaries like they do on DVDs was on the Laserdisc.
Oh, I didn't know
I
that.
didn't
That's
really care
interesting.
about that. I just wanted to see the movie. And the one thing that bothered me, it was like a long play album. I never get past the fact that you had to stop halfway through and flip it over. For some reason, that bothered me. And people are like, well, pretend it's an intermission. Think of it as a bathroom break. We'll
Right.
stop and get a snack. We'll raid the icebox while I'm flipping it over. And all great points. But to me, for some reason, that always bugged me. Plus, they were super duper expensive. Usually I could buy three cheap VHS tapes for the price of one Laserdisc. And as a kid, not a lot of money, I was really trying to get my video library up and going. So better video quality or not, I never did the Laserdisc thing. And then, of
Right.
course, the whole market crashed. Laserdisc just disappeared. And I was very glad that I stuck with VHS
Yeah.
until until that died.
Yeah. Um,
Mm.
I hadn't thought about trying to buy them. I only thought about the renting aspect of it because you could rent them, at certain places. But I remember that going, even the renting of um the disc going kind of out fairly quickly, and there wasn't a lot of stores that rented the disc or the disc player. Last time that I really remember it was somewhere around 19, oh, I want to say 84, 85. And that was the last time I saw anything on laser disc. And I remember it was a family that I was staying with, because I've mentioned before on this podcast, everybody knows that, I had working moms, so I had a lot of second families, a lot of families that I stayed with overnight. I was the only child of a single mom for many years. And one of these families, real close family that I had, rented a laser disc, and they rented Star Wars and Superman, and I
Ooh,
was just
great double
beside
feature.
myself. Yes,
Great double
but
feature.
that's the only one that I ever remember watching, or in the last time I ever even remember seeing it at a video store. And then, of course, you had the excuse me, sorry, I got a little tickle in the back of my throat. And then, of course, we had the VHS, or the VCR, VHS Betamax. It was a Betamax, so a VCR is what plays a VHS.
Yeah, the VCR were the big clunkier ones. Really long story short, what happened was Sony came out with the Betamax,
Uh-huh.
and it was a really good system. The problem with it is Sony hung on to its technology, didn't want to share it. So if you wanted to make movies on beta, shall we say, because beta tapes is what you played on the Betamax, you had to pay Sony royalties for the privilege.
Mm,
Other electronics places, they came up with the VCR, and they made the studios do no such per diem.
yeah.
So the studios like, so what you're saying is we can produce VHS tapes for the VCR and keep all the profit ourselves, or go through Sony and have to give them a kickback.
Goodbye, Sony.
So yeah, goodbye
Yeah.
Sony, and they ended up making VCRs later on. So yeah, Betamax really kind of shot itself in the foot, as far as the technology wars went.
You
And
couldn't
well, and of course,
record as much on the Betamax either, right? You couldn't record as much.
no,
Or
but that was the beauty of it. You couldn't, but it's because they didn't have the crappy speed. Because remember, the way you get more information on a videotape is you slow it down. And the
Mhm.
more you slow it down, the less crisp it becomes because you're not getting as much detail per second.
Yeah.
So yeah, so beta, my understanding was it was really tricky getting a full-length feature film on beta. You really had to kind of scrunch it on there. But
Mm.
VHS is you could get as much as 6 hours on one tape, which again, video libraries. Now I know technically this falls under the category of video piracy, and I didn't do this myself, but I know a few people who did. Of course, what the statute of limitations is. But you could actually, if you bought a blank tape, you could get three full feature films
Yeah.
on one blank tape.
Right. Right.
And you again, if you're trying to amass a library, That's the best way to go.
Yeah. And
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 so yeah.
and if you wanted to record something, I remember recording things off TV was easier. Well, I don't even think I ever did it on a beta. I don't think I ever even did it on a beta, but I remember recording things off TV onto a VHS, and doing it on a VHS is way better because again, it's more stuff. You
Mhm.
get more, you get more Mystery Science Theater or whatever it is you're
Yeah.
you're trying to get off the television. So I do remember that. Well, what else were we going to say about VHS and beta? Did you have any betas or no? Did that just?
No, I missed the whole boat on beta because by the time I could afford, or more importantly, by the time my mother could afford our first home video player, beta had already lost the war. It was
Right.
100% VHS and VCR units. So she bought us a VCR, and I will always remember. I will always remember. It's funny. The first VCR we got, it was actually a gift. This very well-off woman who had bought this bed and breakfast on Cape Cod, friend of my mom's. Long story short, we had done some. I had done some side work for me and some friends of mine, and she'd paid us. But as sort of a bonus, she and her now divorced husband had gotten this VCR. And she goes, Robbie, I'd never use this here, and I'm like, oh. It was like manna from heaven. So we had our VCR, and it broke.
Oh
Things go. It
no.
was it was a free gift. I had it for a while. I got plenty of use out of it. But I remember my mother at work. A friend of mine had come over. It was a weekend. It was a Friday. My best friend had come over. And we go, why don't we watch a video tonight? I call my mom at work and I go, when you get home, would you mind taking us to the video store? And she goes, but we don't have a VCR. It broke. And I go, I know Sean or whoever was working at the place. I'm sure he'll put a video side for us that we can rent. So we'll rent a new VCR along with some videos. And she goes, what are you going to play it on? The TV had broken too. I go, I'll pull my old black and white
Oh.
TV down and we'll watch it on the black and white TV. I don't care. Because I still have my
Right.
black and white TV. And I
Yeah.
come home, and my mother goes, I need you to help me get some stuff out of the car. And we're like, yeah, yeah, sure, sure. We thought you got some groceries, and we want to unload the car so we can go back out. There was a VCR. I come out my door, who's coming in but Tom? He goes, oh, look what she got. I go, you got a VCR? And she goes, uh-huh, and there's more. She'd gotten a 24-inch color TV.
Oh
And we were talking about
wow.
credit cards. She had
Yeah.
just gotten her first Sears credit card, decided to break it in. She says, I didn't have the heart to have you rent a VCR to watch on your little black and white portable. I got us a little present because she was a movie buff too. So the whole family got use out of it. But it was like the
Right.
best surprise ever.
Right. Right. That is a great surprise right there. That's a terrific surprise. All right, I'm going to bring up another one here. I'm changing the subjects just
Please.
slightly on antiquated things.
Sure.
But let's go with antiquated, the arcade. The arcade. Now, I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of money and a lot of time at the arcade. And I don't, yeah, are they still a thing? I don't really, I mean, I know that they're kind of a thing some places, but they're more like a nostalgia thing, or there might be a video game somewhere. But I remember even at the grocery store, there was a whole wing dedicated, like where you go in, you get the cart. There's like video games down the thing there. You go to 7-Eleven, video games at 7-Eleven, arcades with multiple video games. And I remember into the 90s that happened, and I remember in 94 because I was in London. There was this incredible one. They had like a whole car in there, and like you were, it was like a movie screen, and you drive the car. And I remember virtual reality things happening, but it was like very square and blocky. But they had like these. If my memory serves me correctly, somebody might say, well, those didn't come out till 96. It couldn't possibly be in 94. Okay, so I don't know. But, you'd stand in this black thing with bars on it, and you'd have these big, huge goggles on, and your people were shooting things or something like that. Um, But then they went away for a little while. There was this place called in my town. There's this place called Z Games where there were actually computers, and people would come in and sit at computers. So it was, there were still home computers, but not. It wasn't so common that everybody had a home computer. You could go in and play online games there, and that was good because not you still at home you had dial up and things like that, and um, and so you could go to a place where they had a dedicated internet, and then you just paid the fee to be there. You paid like for your time, and you paid like so much for your time to be there, and you could play online video games. But are they? I'm not wrong. Are they? Am I? They're gone now. They're
I
they're
haven't seen any of those in ages, simply because those were popular. Because I remember before the personal computer, like my dad worked for IBM, so he had a Tandy back in like '86 in the house, and that was considered a big deal. But I used to see that when I went to visit him. But even when I was in college, they didn't have. I knew one kid who was I don't want to say Revenge of the Nerds, but he was a tech junkie, and he had his own computer, but most people didn't. What you would do is if you had a project, even for computer class, the library had a computer lounge
right,
or a
right.
computer lab, and you'd go and there'd be banquet tables, and each one would have 5 or 6 computers. Those old Apple IIs, like small
Yeah,
TVs, and it was green and white, and that was it.
yeah.
And that
What
was
about
that way.
arcades? Do you know of any arcades that are up and
Oh,
running right
plenty, but you just made me think of those places where they didn't have true like quarter eaters. What you would do is you would go into a lounge and play video games on computers, but those kind of went away with personal computers as those became more prevalent. As far as true arcades, oh, definitely there was a fantastic one in Hyannis, the town of Barnstable on Cape Cod. It was called Schools Out. And kids
now?
from all over the Cape would come to Schools Out. It was right across from the mall, so it's a really convenient location. You got the mall on one side of 132, and you got the arcade on the other. And it was big, and it had all kinds of crazy games in it. And you would just go and you would just pump quarters in until you ran out of quarters, and that was the first biggie. Then they built one. What was it? I think it was just called the Game Room. It was that built that in my hometown, right, the town of Yarmouth, right by where the old drive-in was. And literally, this gentleman owned a miniature golf course, which was great. And what he did was he owned the property next to it, which was like for parking and whatnot. But he took like one of those big prefab sheds in it, ran power out to it, and got about 20 different arcade games. So it became this makeshift arcade. And I went there for years until that closed. There's still a few small arcades in my area, but they're generally associated with things like bowling alleys. Like you go
Mm.
into a bowling alley and they'll have a side arcade with some games in it. So they're still holding on, but I don't know of any true just plain arcades. Usually they've incorporated themselves with, again, bowling, laser tag, some other type of recreation, so you could do all kinds of activities together as one. But
Yeah,
Lord, I spent a lot of time in arcades when I was a kid back in the '80s.
yeah. I did. I mean, money, and I think I told everybody about a particular arcade in my town called Chuck's Arcade, and I they used to do the. Did you do the tokens? Did you have tokens where you go and give them $1 instead of 4 quarters? They'd give you six
Mm-hmm.
tokens. They'd give
For
us.
it was always quarter for token. It was
Oh,
always
really?
yeah in
Oh,
my
they.
area.
Oh, that's a bummer because they used to give you 6 tokens. They used to for $1. And so it was a little bit more, you get a little bit more of a play. I don't think they were hurting for money, as far as
Probably
it,
not.
you give them, yeah, you give them those so you didn't have to, yeah, it gives you more opportunities, I guess. But yeah, I was such a fan of the arcade. I hung out there so much that they would give me that I was friends with the owners. They would give me uh, free tokens and stuff. They'd be like, "Here you go. Here's some free tokens," and and whatever. Because I was every week I'd be down there spending all the money that I had, digging, picking up change and stuff. And I remember I surprised my mom one time because I would ask my mom all the time, like like there'd be like little pennies or dimes or something hanging around, and I'd always be like, "Can I have this? Can I have these little dimes?" And I collected like I think it was like $11 one time. And I don't know what it was the course over, but I collected $11. And she was just like, I said, "Well, I've got $11. I'd like to go to the arcade." And she's like, "How'd you get $11?" And I'm like, "Because of all the little dimes and nickels and pennies that you said I can
Handsome.
have." I think quarters were somewhat off the limit. Like they would keep the quarters, but I remember like
Quarters.
little pennies and stuff being everywhere, and then just kind of collecting them slowly until I had $11. And $11 when I was 13, that in the 80s, that was a considerable amount of money to be able to go down to the video store and spend $11 or go buy junk food. That was the other thing I was really into, was the junk food.
Well,
Uh,
it's funny you mentioned the convenience stores because that little peach I mentioned at one point it put this little alcove in, and they would put two or three video games there. So I had the best of all worlds. It had comic books, it had junk food and sodas, and it had arcade games. Place became my hangout for a while. Used to drive the people who worked there crazy because they never want kids hanging out there. Well, then you shouldn't put video games in your store if you don't want little kids hanging out there.
yeah, what I mean, that's like kid heaven right there. Comic
It
books,
was. It was.
video games, and junk food. I mean, come on,
Mhm.
man. I mean, so a lot of my allowance, a lot of like little side projects I'd get every once in a while, like cleaning somebody's driveway out. I mean, a lot of
Mow
that just
lawn.
went to just went to video games. So yeah, they didn't have any problem. Old Chuck's Arcade didn't have any problem throwing some scratch my way. You're in. It's like being in with the casinos these days. You spend so much money at the casinos, they fly you out there because they know they're going to recoup their money in no time, in no time at all.
There was a time nationwide. So you put the entire country up against Vegas itself, but there was a time when the arcades were bringing in more money than the casinos.
Oh, really?
There was
Really?
one year, I want to say 1982, where
Ooh.
arcade games actually surpassed what Americans were spending on movie theaters.
Right. Right.
Now that's the entire country, but it was something where it was like $3 billion in
Hmm.
quarters. One quarter at a time. And America spent like some obscene amount of money.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what else is antiquated? You got any other things that you want to talk about? The antiquated of Gen
Oh,
X, of growing up Gen X.
several. One of my personal favorites, of course, is the audio cassette tape.
Yes,
Um,
if you were not going to bring that up, I was going to bring that up.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved my vinyl. Vinyl was awesome, but you couldn't play vinyl in your car. You
Right.
couldn't play vinyl while you were riding your bike. You couldn't play vinyl in a boombox while you were at the beach trying to look cool in front of the girls. You could actually bring your own music. I mean, that's what I like in the early Walkmans. I had ones that were radio. And don't get me wrong, I love my radio, but the idea that I could actually take my stereo where I went and
Yeah.
play not only my favorite tapes, albums on tape, I could make my own mixtape. I
Yes.
could make compilations.
Right.
And even more importantly, if there was a girl I liked, I could make her a mixtape and express all my feelings on a 90-minute max cell. What was more sentimental?
Yeah, well, more sentimental than that. I never did that for a girl, actually. Made her a mixtape.
Not only
So,
did I make girls mixtapes, the first time I got a mixtape from a girl, I was like, oh. I was like calling my friends. I'm like, dude, she made me a mixtape. Like, wow, no kidding. She must really be into you. You know?
I did have a girl give me a mixtape though, and with a message on it. too. I do.
Oh, a message.
Yeah.
What was the message?
She told me she loved me.
What a cool message.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that was
Puppy love.
bringing up. Yeah, I think I was 14, 14 at the time. So
Hmm.
yeah, it was nice. She had I remember White Lion. She put White Lion on there. Wait, you know that song. Wait, I never had a chance. Anyway, I don't want to give it all away. But
More than
no,
understand.
tapes were the best. It surprised me because you know, people who are into vinyl always say vinyl never went away. You know, it never went away. But
And
I
it
was
did.
always under the impression that it did.
It
You
did.
know, I
It
was
did.
always under the impression that tapes kind of replaced it. And I remember people having vinyl thinking this one kid at our school, that I hung out with I was blown away that he collected vinyl. I was just like, why are you collecting vinyl? Like this is gone, you know. Well, tapes are gone, and so is the eight tracks are gone. They were not even they were being a thing of the past in the 80s when I was collecting tapes. But that I mean everything you said. I mean, I love making mixtape, and even into the 90s, even after CDs were kind of becoming
Oh
popular,
yeah.
because you had to have a computer to make a mixed CD, and you didn't have to have a computer to make a mixed tape.
No, you had to
And
have a record button.
yeah,
You know?
and this was late. This was late 90s. This was like 1990. I remember it was late because it was even after the Phantom Menace came out. I was still listening to tapes because I was working in a warehouse, and you could make your own mixed tape. You know, you don't necessarily have to listen to a whole tape because you had to. You know, you work at the warehouse. You're not going to bring like three or four tapes you can kind of keep on you, and you don't want to listen to just one band, maybe one band, but you have your mixtapes. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
you couldn't do that with the CD player, even though CDs were out, and some people were making mixed CDs. And you could hold a whole heck of a lot more on a mixed CD than you could a tape. It was just too hard. It was so much easier to play the tape. I had CDs at home where I would make a mixed tape off the CDs. You know, so I'd play a Cure song and make a mix and make that one, and play a Morrissey song, or play a Nirvana song and make a off that, or even do tape to tape. And the tape to tape thing was awesome because I don't know about you, but I pirated like crazy tape to tape. Did you?
My mother bought me a new stereo for I had to have been maybe 16, 17. Yeah, because I was about to finish high school. And I had hinted the kind that I wanted. I hinted at ones that had two cassette players in them. So you could pirate one to the other. And she bought it for me. I'm like, thank God she bought me one that had the two cassette players, because now I could actually make tapes of tapes.
Yeah.
And I envisioned making my own sort of cottage industry of, shall we say, borrowed entertainment. Never did, but because most of the people I knew were doing the same thing themselves. So there wasn't a real market for it. But I was an enterprising young man, at least.
I had that same idea. I had an idea that, like I'd get a Motley Crue tape and I'd make four of them and I'd rent them. Like, so when it came out, I would rent them, like a video store would rent them. So, but I never did. And everybody else kind of had the same thing, or they knew somebody who had it and they would
You
just
know?
borrow it for free anyway. So it was never really a thing that caught that, it wasn't ever really a thing that I went on to do, I should say. So I had the idea, but didn't execute it. Didn't execute it.
Again, too much competition.
Right,
You know.
right.
Besides, it was naughty,
Yeah,
naughty,
it was
naughty, no
naughty. Oh,
biscotti.
I had tons of of. I mean, we used to be able to buy the tapes, buy the blank tapes, just like buying the blank VCRs.
By the
You know,
pack. So
yeah,
you get like a 10 pack of blank tapes.
yeah.
Everyone knew what you were doing with them.
We're not recording songs off the radio
Oh,
exactly.
I was doing that too. I
Yeah.
used to like the American top 40 survey,
Uh-huh.
or Casey Kasem's. I would listen to the whole thing and wait for a song like to come up and record it. You could actually get an entire album's worth of entertainment of one top 40.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Yeah. I had friends who did that, but I mostly did it for tape to tape. And then of course the endless hours that I'm sure I still have somewhere in my garage of us pretending we were DJs. Did you do that?
Yes. We used to make radio dramas too,
Oh, you
and even
did.
have the whole. Some guy would even do like a mock organ that sort of do 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 tonight on,
Yeah.
dismal theater. We're gonna disaster piece theater. That's what it was, and we stole that from somewhere. Tonight on disaster piece theater. We had actually a really good idea. We were going to make our own kung fu classic because I'm sure you've seen a lot of kung fu Hong Kong films, and the dubs never match up with the
Yeah.
action.
Right, right.
So, well, we had this old 8 millimeter camera, and I came up with the idea. I go, it's great and everything, but we have to we have to emote because there's no sound, so we have to kind of project with our acting when we're that great of actors. Why don't we do dialogue? And someone said, you can't, Rob. It's a silent film. And I go, well, here is the genius. We'll make a film, and then we'll use my tape recorder and record dialogue, and we'll just sync it up and have a movie and a soundtrack. And they go, it won't match up. And I go, if we're doing our own kung fu theater, it won't matter because that's part of the shtick. It never matches up.
Right. It doesn't match up. Yeah.
And it was a great idea. We never did it,
Yeah.
but it was a good idea though.
Yeah, it is a good idea. It's a really good idea.
I had it on
I was
occasion.
kind of wondered why they didn't do that when silent movies were out. Like, why don't they just have a track and just kind of put them on at the same time? Like it made sense to me, and I do know that well, it won't be exact, but it would be close enough in my mind. I thought it would be close enough. I don't know. But I wasn't around back then. I don't know why they didn't do that in silent movies. Like the theater have play the silent movie, then like with the movie comes a record or something like that. I don't know. It was just a thought that I had.
Well,
But
they got more bang from their buck with orchestras, which were probably
oh,
more
okay.
expensive, but made it more of an experience. I do know that someone did as a shtick. They managed to they got the director's notes from a Charlie Chaplin film, and actually they omitted all the scenes where they would break and put up a card telling you what they said. And what they would do is they filled in all the dialogue. They had voice actors actually speak for them, including the ones. I think they actually used lip readers to do this, but it doesn't really matter. But they actually created a audio track complete with dialogue, and believe it or not, it actually detracted from it because those old silent films, again, they're so intense in their emoting that you derive most of the entertainment from just watching them act so intensely,
Mm,
and the dialogue just sort of detracted from it. So they decided to just keep it the old way, where it's just music playing in the background.
interesting. Interesting.
Mm.
Well, yeah. Well, one last thing on that for me, anyway, and that is, it's kind of interesting that with tapes there wasn't as many with audio. It doesn't seem like there was as many options as there was with video. All I remember is tapes, uh, and then later CDs. But during the time of the tape was tape, 8-track, and record, and that was it. I mean, I just remember that, and then 8-tracks were already going out. Records I didn't care about. I mean, I had some, but I mean, tapes for me was where it was at. Where I guess maybe there. I don't know. I guess if you're looking back at video, it's just VHS, Beta, and Laserdisc. So I guess it's the same.
There was something they were experimenting on. They were working on something called laser tape, but it never went anywhere. And I'm not
Laser
sure
tape.
exactly what laser tape. It was going to be a rewindable spool, like a VCR or a beta, but the tape quality was going to be up to par with a laser disc. It was going to be read with a laser,
Mm.
or the light eye, whatever they call it, not laser, but it was going to be very, very, very high definition, and it just never went anywhere. I think it was going to be too expensive per unit to actually make it superior in quality. It would be way more in cost, and that killed it, because what made VHS so fundamentally feasible was the cost per unit.
Yeah.
It always goes back to the price tag, not the quality.
All right. I've got another one.
Please.
Okay. So you mentioned the tape. Going to Radio Shack.
Booyah. Booyah.
I loved going to Radio Shack. Malls in general, there are malls. Malls are still open and people still go to malls and stuff like that. But going to Radio Shack, my goodness. I mean, that was we could talk about tape stores too. Those are gone now as well. Music stores are kind of, you still have them, but a lot of them are merged with other things because you just can't, you can go buy the records at like Barnes and Noble now, but Radio Shack was great. You needed a plug, you needed something, you needed an alarm clock, you go to Radio Shack. And of course, the smartphone killed it, of course, but I think it was already dying out because a lot of stuff you can find at Radio Shack, you could also find at Walmart, in their section. It's kind of like how supermarkets kind of closed out like all the bakeries and butcher shops. There's still bakeries, there's still butcher shops, but you normally go there for specialties or if you're diehard, whatever. But you can kind of get it all encompassed. And I remember that. I remember going less to a Radio Shack and then more to just Walmart. When I'm there at Walmart, it was just as good to pick up, at their technology department, pick up a cord there or something like that, or something, or an alarm clock or whatever, than it was to go to Radio Shack. What about you? What do you think? What about Radio Shack for you?
To me, the funnest thing about Radio Shack is, and again, a lot of stores had electronics departments. If you wanted, a coaxial cable or whatnot, but I would walk into a Radio Shack and find things that I didn't know I needed until I saw them. Found things I didn't know existed until I saw them.
Right.
I mean, wow, this cord is an adapter where I can connect my VHS player and my Walkman. I don't know why I would want to do that, but I've got to have that now.
Yeah.
And so many other things. It was like, it's not SD, but there's something online now where it's like all these weird concept, like they have a lamp that looks like the moon or stuff like that.
Yeah.
That was Radio Shack 30, 40 years ago. You would walk in, you'd be like, oh my God, look at all these really cool toys. Yeah. Anyone who had any slight interest in electronics was like a kid in a candy shop when they went into Radio Shack.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do remember Radio Shack being more of the, if you're into technology, that's where you go. You don't really go to Walmart. You go to Walmart, maybe you're there to pick up something more specific, but you go to Radio Shack and you're like, oh yeah, okay, they've got some very interesting stuff.
You'd go to Walmart if you knew what you needed. You would walk into Radio Shack when you didn't know what you needed and find something you didn't know you needed.
Yeah. I also remember Radio Shack, though, still being relevant to me because for a little while after, even though that you had technology departments at Walmart and Target and Kmart, but the thing that they had there was they had more stuff for music. They had more like cables for your microphones and things like that, which you really couldn't get at Walmart. So you'd have to go to, if your guitar cord went out, and you could go to a guitar store, of course, but Radio Shack had that too. So it was a lot more expansive when it comes to music and stereo stuff too, that you couldn't quite necessarily get at Walmart.
You know what? I knew Radio Shack's days were numbered, and they didn't close like the next month, but I knew they were losing their, as you would say, relevance. I had gotten a new combo player, and I was trying to attach an old style game system to it. Now, of course, the rainbow of technology is red, white, yellow. You got the three prong cord, and you put the red with the red, yellow with the yellow, and the white with the white, and then do the exact same thing under the piece of equipment. The old style game system I had was only the red and the white. So I needed an adapter that would take the red, white, yellow and narrow it down to the red, white field. And I knew there had to be such a thing. I had actually owned those things before, but I went to the Radio Shack and explained it to the young man behind the counter. Yes, I needed an adapter and explained the whole situation to him. And I got this like deer in the headlights look like, huh? And I go, yeah, I just need. I'm trying to attach an old game system to a new combo player. I just
Right,
need this. And not only did he not know what I was talking about, he couldn't figure out why I would want to do that.
right, yeah,
And it's because I have an old game system that still works, and I want to play it on my new home theater. And well, they don't make stuff like that. Now, not they've stopped making it, but I knew they had it at one point. He goes, they don't make that anymore. And I'm like, okay. And I believe, I did have trouble. I don't know. In fact, I think my brother-in-law just happened to have one and he gave it to me. But the idea that someone in Radio Shack would be that sort of single-minded, myopic when it came to technology, I go, if this is the staff they're producing,
right,
they're going to isolate themselves from their own market. I mean, people go into Radio Shack and you expect somebody knows what they're doing
yeah,
electronically.
yeah.
And when he did, and I'm like, I didn't even stop going. I kept going to Radio Shack after that, but I'm like, clearly their relevance is fading fast, and
Yeah.
sadly it did.
Dave on his channel has a thing about Radio Shack where he says like there's so many things in the store that you can just it just your smartphone does it, and then so many things that we're just used to buying online. And I remember being very skeptical about buying things online when it first came out. And now I just buy things online. I still go to the store too. I'm still a little old school when it comes to certain things, but a lot of people, just online purchases are just nuts. It's just like that's all they do. They put buying online has put so much out of business and made so much irrelevant. And the place where I'm at, the the mall that's here is really almost like an amusement park. There's like there's like trampolines in there and stuff like
Rock
that.
climbing walls.
Yeah, we're not going there to shop. There's places to eat and stuff like that, restaurants. There's the thing where they have like we were talking about earlier with the bowling alley with a lot of different stuff with the skating rink and stuff like that. But it's really more like an amusement park rather than like a one-stop shop. I can go to the record store, I can go to the bookstore, I can go to a clothing store. There's some of that still there, but there's so much. It's just almost equal. There's the clothing store. There is some things like that there, but it's almost just like you're going there to ride the little carts and stuff. And it's interesting that it's kind of turned that way at this point, because the mall's just gone almost. I don't
And
know.
40 years ago, yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that because I know we started on Radio Shack, and I don't know
Well,
what.
just the idea of places that were culturally relevant.
Yeah.
Well, people don't go out to shop anymore. They have just brought to them by FedEx and
Oh
UPS.
yeah, yeah.
But the malls themselves were a hangout unto themselves.
I was a bit of a
Um,
mall rat. Were you? Did you go to the
oh,
mall and walk up
huge,
and down? Yeah.
huge. Because usually you'd want to go to a movie. The cinemas were usually close to malls. The one in
Hmm.
my town was, but you'd want to get there early so you could maybe have a snack first, see a few friends, see if there were any girls around. It became a social gathering point um, for your final destination. And to a lot of people, it was the destination itself. And that has so gone out the window. Teenagers don't need places to hang out anymore because they have their phones,
Yeah. Yeah.
so they can hang out with each other just as easily, in their own house as they could in the mall. And you don't have security guards saying, kids, get away from here, kids, get away from here. Because
Yeah.
that's 90% of what mall security did when I was a kid. Just
Okay.
tell the teenagers
Tell
not to
the
congregate.
tell the children to take off, get
Yeah,
out of
yeah,
here.
hassle teenagers. That's basically what they did. Paul
Yeah.
Blart, Paul talk.
Yeah. Well, any any other? Sorry, I think I'm a little bit under the weather here. Any other?
Your voice is better, but that cough does seem to be persistent.
It is. It's like a
So
tickle on the back of my throat. So I don't know. It's bothering me. But
get get some herbal tea or something. But speaking of phones, there is one more thing that I definitely wanted to talk about,
okay, yeah, for sure.
and that was the disappearance of the payphone.
Oh
I
yes.
mean, people don't. I mean, you watch old horror movies, and 90% of them are people trying to find a payphone that works and making
Yeah.
sure they have enough coinage on them. Finding phones in public was a really big deal. I remember um, wanting to call my mom because middle school had a payphone. I wanted to call my mom to see if I could have permission to stay late for some project or something, and having to wait behind people because there was a lot of people on the phone. I remember like, you if you were lost or running late, you'd be driving around looking for the nearest payphone so you could call home to explain that you were going to be late. Uh, People just don't need cell phones anymore, and now thus, and every now and then you see one. Every now and
Yeah.
then I'll be in an old plaza or something. There'll be a payphone, and I'm like, "Oh, is there a drug dealer that lives in the area?" Because that's 90% of the people who use payphones these days are drug dealers. But it
Oh,
was
okay.
it was a really big. I remember when I was in school, when I was up in North Adams, place I lived in. Um, of course, we didn't have cell phones, so we actually had the phone company install a payphone in an unused broom closet upstairs, and we turned that into our own makeshift phone booth. But the
Yeah.
advent of the personal, the cell phone, has
Yeah.
just changed the way we communicate as a people to the point where, remember, I was mentioning horror movies a little while ago. For people to get lost and find themselves in a scary position, you actually have to speak to that. Oh, I forgot to pay my phone bill. Oh, I don't have any
Yes.
bars. Oh,
Right.
my battery's
Oh,
dead. It's
uh,
become something that they have to actually work into the plot.
right. Yes. Yeah. Um, I I remember the disappearance of the home phone. Like, I mean, there's no home phone here.
I have one.
Do you have a home? You have a landline? Is it a landline
They call it, that's so
or is
funny
it
that
an
you mentioned that.
internet line?
It's an internet. They still call them landlines, but they're tied into my personal computer. And if the power goes out, the phone goes out. It's not a
Yeah.
true landline anymore. Though they stopped those, I want to say 10, 12 years ago, I believe altogether. I believe there is those things a landline, but
Oh, there
I
really
still have a
isn't.
I still have a home phone though.
Okay. All right. It's then, but it's probably not wired to your wall where you got to do this
No,
big
it's
deal.
it's
No.
completely wired into my personal computer.
Yeah. It's hands free, right? It's I mean not hands free,
Yes,
but cord free.
cordless.
But I
Oh,
remember trying to
yeah.
go, like away from people with the cord, like into the next room and shut the door with the cord under the door so that no one can hear my conversation, talking to people, and just, uh,
I remember in my mid teens, cordless phones were around, but they were like the microwave. Only the rich kids had them.
right,
And
right.
I remember I had called this girl, and she goes, she got the phone. And she's like, "Oh wait, I wanna talk, and I wanna go to another room to talk." And I go, oh, like you're going to your parents' room to use their phone or something? She goes, oh no, I have a cordless phone. I'm just going to take it into my room. And I remember thinking, I am so out of my league. This girl has a
Right.
cordless phone.
A
Oh
cordless.
wow.
Right, right. Yeah. No, my uncle got a cordless phone when I was in the 80s, and that was like a big deal. I thought it was I wasn't sure the difference between a car phone and a cordless phone. I thought he could take it anywhere. I was like, "Whoa, that's amazing." Like, no, 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 it's cordless. Like I can walk about 100 feet, but that's about it. And I can't take this in my car. I'm like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, that's one thing the cell phones got rid of. And this, I just being tethered, and then the phone booth too. Yeah, I don't remember the last time I've ever even seen a phone booth. But do you remember the movie Phone Booth?
The movie. Oh, the movie.
Colin,
Yes, of course, the
yeah,
feature
Colin,
film. Yes,
yeah, Colin
yes,
Farrell was in it. I
I
believe. Was it
do.
Colin Farrell?
Maybe
Yeah, he
that
goes
movie
to
was
a
a phone
phone
booth, and then
booth.
this the terrorist has a beat on him.
Yeah,
That was
has a
like 20
tab.
years ago. I vaguely remember it, but I do remember it.
Right, right. I mean, that's going to be a movie you're going to have to explain to children later.
Hey, I know. Do
Yeah.
you remember the Phantom Toll Booth?
The Phantom Toll Booth.
The
No.
Phantom Toll Booth. That's an old Chuck Jones animated film with Butch Patrick. That movie was a lot of fun. I
What's
don't
it
know what made
about?
me think of it. Um, this like spoiled kid on his birthday gets this phone booth and he thinks it's a dumb prize, but when he goes into it, he comes out into another universe. And when he goes into this other universe, um, while he's trying to find his way back, he has all these adventures with some friends he meets along the way. It's sort of in the Wizard of
It's like
Oz,
Bill and Ted's.
like Bill and Ted, or
Kind of.
very much like Bill. I compare it more towards like the Wizard of Oz, but yeah, it's
uh,
that type of thing. It's that type of thing.
right, right. Well, that's kind of interesting, the Bill and Ted thing, because like they had phone booths in the future. Like we don't have phone booths now. What are you talking about? You have a phone booth that you're going to travel back in time with. We don't even use those.
Maybe they'll make a comeback.
Maybe like like records are going to make a comeback. One last thing I want to get in there, at least one last thing for me, and that is the drive-in movie theater. Do they have drive-in movie theaters anymore?
There's one drive-in theater left on Cape Cod. It's in Wellfleet, which is nowhere near me. I haven't gone there in years. It's a flea market as well, and it's literally being kept alive out of sheer nostalgia. People go to it just because they can't bear the thought of it closing up. I can't remember the last time I saw a drive-in movie there. There used to be one right here in my hometown of Yarmouth, over by Parker's River.
Hmm.
That's the one. Speaking of boom boxes, in like 83, 84, when the drive-ins were like trying to make their last stand, they got rid of those silly speakers that people were always accidentally ripping off the posts and breaking. What they did was they made an arrangement through a local AM station to simulcast the soundtrack.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
So what my best friend and I did was if you went all the way in the back of this old drive-in, there was a spot where the fence had been broken and never repaired. You could walk in, and it was shaded enough with trees that nobody could see you, even if they cared. And I would take my boom box and with a little finagling, I could get the sound. And we would
Oh,
watch drive-in movies for free.
yeah, yeah.
And that's how I saw Fast Times at Ridgemont High when I was only 15, too young to get really
Ah,
to see it. So yeah, but
you naughty
they closed
boy.
that drive-in. They briefly reopened it during COVID. I remember
Oh,
they thought during the COVID shutdown when the theaters were all shut down that drive-ins would make a renaissance. Sadly, it
yeah.
was not the case. There were still a couple around in the country, but they're almost out of sheer nostalgia.
Right, right. Yeah, they kind of went out pretty quickly with where I was. I remember there being one when I was a kid, and going in, and then you hook the thing to your window or to your visor or something like that. It's like a metal thing, and you sit there, and and you'd listen. And then when we moved to another place, uh, and I was a teenager, and they had one very briefly. And me and a friend of mine, we used to be, because he moved to that town before I did, and I'd go visit him sometimes on the weekends or whatever. And you could go to the edge of it, and you could see the movie. And if you were real quiet, you couldn't be loud. You could hear there was enough, just noise there was enough from the cars that were paying. But I remember it was like like so much a car or something.
Mhm.
Like, is that so? Then, like, if you packed your friends in the car or whatever, then you would have to pay, for a seat for each one. You just paid so much per car. But I also remember them, and I didn't realize this at the time because they went out when I was very little. So my mom kind of kept me in the car. They were dangerous because they were like playgrounds and stuff, like at the front of the theaters and sometimes little places. But they weren't the most, it was night, and so it wasn't always the most of savory characters. And
No, it was not.
I do
No, it was
remember
not.
that one of my friends, my friend's brother, my friend's older stepbrother, got assaulted at a theater. Yeah, yeah. I didn't hear about this until much much later, but I think that's part of the reason why they went out. I don't know for sure, but yeah. I mean, it was a pretty bad situation. And then I heard more and more stories. Oh, yeah. You go to the drive-in theater, there's a lot of crime happening at the drive-in theater. There's a lot of muggings. You get out and you go up to the swing set or something like that, or you go up to the front, whatever, and it's not just it's kind of a dangerous place. So
Hmm.
anyway, yeah, it
Wow.
was bad. It was bad news. So, but those are gone now. But I wouldn't mind that. I think that's fun. I think we got to make it a comeback and
Well,
do it.
the problem in the northern half of the country is just too cold. Like
Yes.
I'll use my area for example. You can only use a drive-in about 3 months out of the year.
Yeah.
That's an awful lot of land to tie up in a not low property value area that you can only use as a cash cow for 1/4
Right.
of
Right.
the year. Now, a lot of places found really ingenious ways to make money in the off season. Here on Cape Cod, um, they would lease the land out to people who would bring their boats out of the water. So you
Mm.
have your boat in the water May, June, July, August, September. You take your boat out of the water. You stockpile it at Parker's River Drive-In Theater, and then you'd pull it out the next May.
Hmm.
And you would pay to lease it there for those months, and you could make enough money to kind of offset the non lucrative months. But again, most drive-ins stayed in existence with Florida, Texas, Alabama, places where you could just have it all year round, even if it wasn't a
Yeah.
particularly um, lucrative area. You have a 12-month season as opposed to a 3-month season.
Right, right. Yeah. That does make a lot of sense. It would be difficult to have it at other places for it to be cost effective, especially for the business owner. Well, okay, Thrash, you have a show we have our Monday night show that we do. So everybody tune in for that. I believe by the time this comes out, I'll have enough time that people will listen to this and we will talk about this on our Monday night. What makes this different than the Monday night is that you get to chime in on it. So please don't miss the Monday night. If you're a podcast listener, I don't care how you listen. I'm happy you're listening. But just so you know, check out the YouTube page. If you like what we're doing here, you love what we're doing over on YouTube. We got more videos on YouTube. We've got the Monday night live stream. We just got, more stuff going on over there. And this Monday, we're going to be talking about this very issue, so you can chime in on your antiquated experiences about growing up Gen X. And Thrash, you also have your own. Channel and your own
Show.
show. On which night of the week do you do
Well,
it?
the channel, of course, is Thrash Pondo Pongs, just like me. And traditionally, it's Thursday nights. Thursday nights, I'll have an open forum Q&A. Sometimes there's a specific topic. Sometimes I do what's called Bring Your Own Topic, and we just see what happens organically. I've been getting a lot of mileage out of a trivia game that I've been doing. Not a trivia contest, Nothing as fancy as that. You could say I plead no contest, but it's a game where I compile some trivia questions, and we have a lot of fun with those. And again, traditionally Thursday, but occasionally, since I've been currently unemployed, the establishment I've been working at has been closed for renovations. Hopefully, should be opening soon, though. But as I've had more nights off, I've had more opportunities, and I've been doing some Tuesday nights as well, and those have been a lot of fun as well. But this week, Thursday night is when you'll be able to find me.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And it's mostly Thursday night.
Mostly Thursday. Traditionally,
You're kind of like, hey, I got nothing going on. Let's talk to some fans, right? You know,
let's rap. Let's chat. Let's.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Dialogue.
I really enjoy the live stream.
Thank you.
And so everybody check out the channels. Of course, those will be listed in the description box. Please, by all means, stop on over and like this video, subscribe to this podcast. If you're listening on a podcast, if you're watching this on YouTube, of course, subscribe to both of ours. And if you're listening on podcast, head on over to YouTube and subscribe to both of ours. I think that's going to cover it. I think that's going to be about it. Like everything, share. Yeah, don't forget to share. That's the most important thing. Share it on your favorite social media. It's a lot of fun to talk about this stuff. We have a lot of interesting topics. All right, folks, thank you so much. I am glad that you were with us this evening, and we will talk to you again very soon.
Very soon. Ciao.
All right.